Hello everyone, I'm Catherine Barrett with O'Reilly Media. Thank you for joining us for today's webcast, The Facebook Application Ecosystem, Why Some Thrive and Most Don't. Today's presenter, Shelley Farnham, is a co-founder and social architect at Waggle Labs, which develops innovative social applications. Shelley received her PhD in social psychology at the University of Washington, and she performed research and advanced prototyping for 7 years at Microsoft Research, focusing on social networking, mobile social coordinate, and personal analytics. In 2005, she left to consult with startups and to teach the social web at the University of Washington before she co-founded Waggle Labs in 2007. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Shelley.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming today. Glad you could join us for our webinar. As Catherine mentioned, I'm Shelley Farnham, and I have a background in social psychology and spent a number of years at Microsoft Research before venturing on my own. We started Waggle Labs about a year ago, and I just wanted to explain a little bit how I ended up performing the study of the Facebook application ecosystem. Well, we've been exploring a number of projects. As I mentioned, we're only about a year old now, and we've been trying to figure out what do we want to pursue and how do we want to pursue it. Basically, we are specializing in leveraging social networking technologies to enhance face-to-face interactions. And one of our main projects is Patholo.com, which is a private community for conferences and events. The idea is to have an online directory social recommendation system with enhanced badging. And one of the questions that we had, which I think a lot of us have, is whether or not we should build a Facebook application or not. There are many events within the space of Facebook. And so, as a small startup company, we don't want to build an entire network from scratch. And so one of the questions is, can we effectively leverage Facebook to build a social networking application? And when I was exploring this question, I was looking around and I found an OReilly radar report called the Facebook Application Platform that was published in 2007. And they're noting that in the time since the Facebook Application Platform was launched, something like 10,000 applications have been added to the system. Nonetheless, very few of those applications actually generated enough traffic to be self-sufficient, usually through revenue models. So here's a close-up of that image from that Radar O'Reilly report, showing that in the top, very small percent of the top applications actually generated daily usage in the tens of thousands, let alone the millions. And so, the question that I had was, well, why is this? A big part of my approach has always been to do deep dives into analyzing social systems when making design decisions. And so I actually asked the O'Reilly crew if I could borrow or consume their data and actually take a closer look and further examine the Facebook application ecosystem to help answer this question for myself and for others, whether or not it was the right environment to be creating an application. And aside from wanting to know for our own applications, why do we really care about this space? There's a lot. This is a great visualization that Dave McClure put together called the Social Graph Platform Wars. It's actually extremely difficult to, create an entirely complete social graph. So a social graph is generally the set of all the people and how they are connected. And so as people are creating social graphs and achieving the critical mass required to be an effective one, very few people are actually be able to enter the space from scratch. And so, we're all, watching very closely to see who are going to be the winners in this space, particularly from an application perspective. So looking at Facebook and thinking about what does it mean to be a social graph platform, what can we learn from doing a deeper analysis? And one of the questions I had was, is it really a platform versus is it a marketing? Should we be thinking of it as a marketing vehicle? There's a lot of money potentially to be made in the social networking space from advertising. It's the dominant revenue model for applications within the Facebook system. Also thinking about, what is the difference between a social networking platform versus a more general social technology platform? What kind of behaviors are people really exhibiting within the space? Is it primarily engaged in the activity of maintaining and developing social relationships, which is what I would call social networking, versus more generally social technology, sharing, collaboration? There's a lot of social behaviors that occur more generally in social technology platform. Then the other question that I really wanted to address was getting a better sense of who is actually in Facebook, looking at how people actually use the applications and getting a sense for are applications that are targeting a specific type of population going to fare better than other kinds. Is it really just for teenagers? As we observe that Facebook migrates increasingly away from being just for college students and more towards the general population, are applications that are more, say, professional, more around shopping, more targeting at parents, also going to thrive within that system. So what I did was, as I mentioned, I was able to get this data set from the OReilly Radar crew. What they had been doing is scraping the directory of applications where there's some basic usage data that's provided for each application, such as daily usage, percent usage, and they've been doing that for a number of months. And so the study that I performed spanned between September and November. What I did was I took that set of data of all the applications and how they're being used, and then selected the top 260 of these applications, the top 260 successful applications during that 3-month period, and then just actually installed all of them and did a deep dive, looking at them, coding them on various dimensions. And then I also randomly selected 80 failing applications. These are applications that had sufficient numbers, up to 100 daily users, but didn't make it into that, would be classified as failing versus succeeding. And then looking at, what features within these systems appeared to be instigating growth along the social graph, and then what types of applications were really thriving within that system. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the results of this analysis. The first thing to say is, how exactly do you measure success? As I mentioned, the application directory had a number of potential measures, such as total active users, percent active users, how many times people installed it, how many times people reviewed the application. I really wanted to see which of these measures most predicted growth. It was definitely the case that it was daily active users had the most predictive abilities. These are correlations, which you may or may not be familiar with, but most of the activity in growth was predicted by daily active usage, and so I decided to really focus on that as this sort of, measure of success. Also, in part because it's in daily active usage that people are coming in. If you are using a revenue model for your application, an advertising revenue model, then that people are actually there every day is very important to you. So an important thing to understand is what does it mean to grow virally in a social graph? Theoretically, if you sort of look at the maximal potential growth within a network, if everyone logs in, say, once a day, and they can send the application to up to 20 of their friends each of those days, then the application can spread extremely rapidly along this social graph. So that maximum would reach 1.28 billion within a week. Now, obviously, that's not the way it does spread. This is, theoretical maximum. But it does actually bear out that if you compare applications that are more in the failing category. So this is the graph on the left here. 2 applications that are more in the succeeding category, and this is the graph on the right here. What you can see is that for these applications on the left that never really achieved success, these are average daily active user counts of about 60 a day. They never grew. They never took off. They remained very flat in their usage over the first 11 weeks within the system. Whereas these applications that you would categorize as very successful, because they had more than 500 daily active users in any week, they achieved that success within the first couple of weeks. So you can see between week 1 and week 2, they grew from somewhere around 3,300 to 6,300 within the first couple of weeks. So basically what's happening here is if an application is going to succeed through viral growth, that happens within the first week or 2, or it doesn't happen at all. So the next question was, well, okay, so which features within these failing and succeeding applications are present within this failing or succeeding application? So that was, one of my first questions is, so the red bars comparing to the green bars. Red bars are the failing applications, and the green bars are the succeeding applications. What percentage of those applications had that feature? And what you can see is that succeeding, and the most significant effects are it's in order from left to right. And what you can see is that succeeding applications are very much using these features that help them spread virally. So one of the most important ones is that they send notifications in the feeds, the mini feeds in particular, of the activity. What are your friends doing with that application? They largely, these applications, the succeeding applications largely use notifications and feeds. They also largely use discussion areas, so this is, places where people can interact with each other. Surprisingly, there are a number of applications that didn't actually provide tools for people to invite each other in to use the application. Facebook provides a feature where you can invite up to 20 of your friends when you first install the application. And the applications that use this feature also tend to be, the succeeding applications tend to use this feature more often as well. And just to take a closer look at this effect of these features, again, just because most of the growth of these applications happened within that first week, I wanted to see, what is the actual difference in usage depending on these features in that first week. And again, you can see here, there's a very large effect of if the application is the behaviors, there are behaviors happening within the application that their friends are notified of it. There's a huge difference here within that first week. When you use these notifications, you're much more likely to have this kind of viral growth. What's surprising is how important the discussion area is. Again, Facebook provides a feature that you can easily plug into your application where it provides an area for your users to talk to each other. And not every application uses this feature. The ones that do also have a much more likely to grow quickly, providing that discussion area for the users. That you can invite your friends. Again, it's also very important, and that you use that you invite your 20 friends at sign up. And the stars here indicate that these are statistically significant effects. And then also that you put the application on the users' profiles. So people, it's a very common path to entry into an application that you see it on a friend's profile, you click on it and install it yourself. So it is actually important to use these features that enable your application to grow virally along the social graph. The next sort of high-level question was, well, what types of applications are thriving within this system? And for that, I went through and categorized each application depending on what is the primary user goal that's being met by that application. And, and as you can see here, A huge percentage of the successful applications are really focused on enhanced communication, and then after that, the most common uses was social comparison, and I'll explain these more a little bit in a minute here. The next common was play social games, and then after that, social selection and profile enhancement. So I'm going to just drill down on each of these a little bit. What does that mean? What does it mean, enhanced communication? What's very clear from having reviewed all these applications that people are looking for new ways and new opportunities to interact and meet and share with their friends. And so applications that really just help people talk to each other tend to be very successful. So the fun wall, for example, you're just sending, you're just enhanced messaging in the form of, you can add video, graffiti, greetings on each other's profiles. Here, this Get a Buzz is a really interesting one where you can actually leave a voice recorded message on someone's profile. Sending text messaging. So basically, you're just increasing communication or opening new communication channels. Different mediums. A lot of these enhanced communication tools were media enhanced, so you're able to send somebody a video or a picture, but it's very much the focus is on interaction. Another is paraverbal communication. So in this case, paraverbal means nonverbal. If I want to send a friend a hug, if I want to send a friend a kiss, these applications are extremely popular. They allow people to communicate nonverbal, paraverbal information such as affection. And then finally, another category of enhanced communication was structured or scripted interactions. So a Q&A would be an example of that. So the application allows you to structure the interaction so you know that you're supposed to ask a question here and then answer a question there. And these are also really popular. The second category of really popular application are ones that enable social comparison. So people are really, really interested in learning how do they compare to other people in their network on various dimensions, such as or do we like the same, or do we like the same music? Do we know the same people? There's a lot of questionnaires. You answer a really brief questionnaire, and based on that questionnaire, you know who you're similar to. There's also a lot of rating. People are rating each other, getting their friends to rate them, comparing them to other people. And then in the context of these social comparison applications, there's also a lot of social matching. So based on where you are on these various dimensions, we're going to make some recommendations to you about who you would like to interact with. And again, these are extremely popular. Another category is playing social games. These, there's nothing. These are pretty self-evident. What these are is social games in a game that requires more than one human being to be there to play the game, and people really enjoy these. Again, these tend to be pretty lightweight. People are just looking for new ways to interact with their friends through Facebook. And then finally, the other type of one I mentioned here is social selection. This is really interesting. There's a common problem in social networking applications, which is that it's really hard to say no to people when they want to be your friend, and so people tend to have very large lists of friends. But because of that, they have trouble actually getting to the people that they care the most about. And so the number of applications out there that really help you isolate your top 25 friends, put them in one convenient place, and then make it easy to interact with them. So Top Friends is an example of that. Here are my top 23 friends, and I can really easily poke them or send them a note. And this is actually on my profile, so other people can also see, who my top friends are, and are they in my list of top friends. And finally, a really common type of application. Here you can see there's 38 of these applications. So there are a lot of them that have achieved popularity. which are about enhancing your profile. Some of them are it's just media, it's very decorative. Here I'm going to put a picture describing my mood or my Calvin and Hobbes' favorite quote of the day. But another type of profile enhancement is group identity. So if I'm if I'm a Republican or a Democrat, I might have a flag indicating my affiliation, or a sports fans, or if I'm from Canada, it'll say you see the Canada maple leaf. Also, there's a lot of value expressive profile decorations. So, what are my top 10 favorite books? A lot of quotes, things like that, where people really want these ways to help other people see what they're like. It's very, very expressive of who you are. So one question that I commonly get is, well, what kind of applications? I mean, do applications tend to sort of, at what point does the application ecosystem become saturated with a particular kind of application? And this graph really gets to that. There's all these different types of applications, and in the period between September and November of last year, certain kinds of applications were extremely popular. For example, social selection, but there was no more overall growth in that genre of application. So it is the case that there had pretty much been the application ecosystem has become saturated with that type of application. Sending gifts are also extremely popular type of application, but they tend to rotate through quickly. There are only that many that are popular at any particular time. However, other kinds of applications like the social comparison applications, the enhanced communication applications, there's a whole new surge of dating applications that were still growing rapidly in usage in this time period. So it does appear to be the case that certain kinds of applications, there is that kind of saturation. They are very popular. There's a lot of usage, but there's a lot of rotation as well of that type of application, and so there's no overall growth. So just some basic study conclusions. As we observed, if you're going to have an application succeed, it's usually going to be by growing virally along the social graph immediately, or not at all. There are a number of explanations for this. There are maybe some very solid, potentially successful applications out there in the application ecosystem, but because they're growing steadily and slowly over time, they don't make it into the top 200. There's also some argument that once people become saturated by these virally growing applications, they just have less time or attention for the more slow and steadily growing ones. These applications that are growing virally, they are exploiting the invitation and notification features that Facebook provides to enable people to share along their social graph reasonably rapidly. Successful applications are very much social networking applications. So earlier I talked about is Facebook a social networking platform, or is it a social technology platform? And I would argue from this analysis that it's very much social networking. People are very much engaged in sharing, interacting with their friends, and maintaining their social the social relationships, growing the social relationships. We're not seeing a lot of other kinds of activity like knowledge sharing or something like job finding, that sort of a thing. You're not seeing a lot of professional networking or shopping or recommending what to buy. These applications really do seem to be targeting a very specific life stage, which is when people are in that identity play and exploration. They're really figuring out who they are. They want to know how they are compared to other people. And in that context, they're also maintaining and growing their network, as opposed to people who might, in a later stage of life, might be more concerned about filtering or controlling their network and perhaps increasing relevance as opposed to quantity. And I was also much struck by how lightweight a lot of these applications were. They do seem very much indicative that application developers are not investing a lot in Facebook applications. And there are many, again, there are many theories for this. One being the way that Facebook handles data portability, and it is risky for application developers to create a high investment application within Facebook when they don't actually have control over the data that they need to make their applications effective because of Facebook's privacy policies. Also, it could also just be the case it's just too soon. Like, again, these sort of more heavyweight, serious applications need more time to mature within the system before they're going to be considered very successful. Whereas these really more lightweight, game-like applications can spread more easily, and it exhibits this viral behavior. And then also I want to say that I was much struck when I was reviewing all of these applications how people were very interacting with others and sharing and communicating. It is very much the focus of all of these applications, even the social games. In a case where people did not have the opportunity to interact and converse in the context of the game itself, they would overload these other features of the system just to be able to interact with each other around that game. So if the application was not using the discussion area, then people would use the review section that's outside of the application in order to interact with each other. Another example of that is the horoscopes. So people would put horoscopes on their profile. But people really, what they wanted to do is they wanted to interact with each other around this information. And so in the discussion areas of the horoscopes, there'd be a lot of conversation. Am I Pisces? Are you a Pisces? What does this mean about us in terms of our personality? And so applications that aren't providing these communication features for their users are actually missing out quite a bit, because people are going outside of the application then in order to interact with each other around the application. So again, looking, speaking in terms of the future and where are social networking platforms going to go in the future, and what are potential opportunities for innovation, I very much was struck by Facebook, because it is still very much about social networking and personal social networking. There are a lot of enterprise solutions, that would be focused on different target users that have not been explored in that space much. So social coordination around more professional events is certainly what our focus is with Passable. Social matching, again, in a more professional environment, human resources or knowledge management, finding expertise exchange, and then also collaboration around content, so wikis or Word documents, using the social network to determine sharing permissions, that sort of a thing. I would also expect shared shopping, recommendation systems for what you should like based on what is happening in your network. I do know anecdotally that there's a lot happening in the area of large-scale social mobilization. People like Barack Obama has been doing very effectively using Facebook to help generate support and dollars for his campaign. Speaking more generally about social networks, I would love to see people. There's some efforts being made at integrating the sort of communication channels across networks. I haven't seen a whole lot of success in this, but people are trying. On the right here, you'll see an example of Facebook. Someone had made an MSN Messenger plugin for Facebook because they wanted their Messenger buddy in Facebook. So they're looking for this sort of integration of their friend lists and buddy lists and communication channels. Another area for innovation is visualizations. It's still pretty challenging to get a good overview sense of who is in your network, how people are related and connected to each other. And so I really do expect that in the next few years we're going to see some interesting innovation in this direction as people are building on top of these networks. Then also, a final area that needs to be addressed is people with social networks are extremely dynamic. Applications generally tend to underestimate just how completely dynamic your social networks are. Who you are really good friends with today is very different from who you're good friends with 6 months ago, or who you're working with today is very different from who you were working with 6 months ago. And there's some folks who argue, in fact, that the reason why there are these huge migrations from network to network, like from MySpace to Facebook, is because it's easier. Socially, it's easier to recreate your entire social network than it is to remove people or delete people from your network and face the possible negative social consequences of rejecting somebody's friendship. And so we need tools that really help people more dynamically handle these changes or fluctuations in their social network without breaking the social rules about rejecting people's friendships. So where are there opportunities for growth? Looking in this space, I really think there's a lot happening, and in particular, for someone like me, I'm really excited about the professional networking, or applying these sort of new features or tools for social networking back into more professional environments, but also leveraging all that is happening in the online space of social networking and pushing it back into face-to-face interactions. There's a strong sense of, why is this all online? How come it's not actually more with us as we're interacting with people in the form of mobile and off-the-desktop technologies? Okay, so I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'm ready for questions. If you want to learn more or read more, there's more sort of deeper analysis in the paper itself. There's a whole section on generating revenue, for example, which I didn't really highlight in this presentation. And then if you want to learn more about WAG Labs or Pathful, here are my websites. And also, I'm always excited to analyze people's data. So if you've got data and you're interested, let me know.
Hey, Shelley, thank you so much. That's fascinating. I know a lot of us are really struggling to understand Facebook, and this is very helpful. Before we take some questions, there were a couple earlier in the while you were giving your presentation that I think maybe you want to address. The first one was, someone was asking or just wondering whether the discussion feature will be less valuable now that we have Facebook chat, and I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Actually, I would say that real-time chat and asynchronous interactions, such as the discussion feature, they're really different modes of communication, and they tend to be independent of each other. So that there is chat would not affect much how much a discussion feature is used. Because one case you're really focused on asynchronous interaction where you're trying to access people who are not there, and the other is more you're doing real-time interaction.
Okay, that makes sense. And another question that came through is, someone asked, what's the best way to promote an application to help its chances of getting traction? And for example, should you build a super user with lots of friends before releasing your application to help get the word out? What's your advice?
Yeah, well, I certainly would think that really focusing on people who are highly connected is actually a really good way to go. There are some applications like the zombie game. You can actually go around and find the people within the zombie game, because the way the game works is you you earn points by getting the application to spread. So you can actually use the Zombie game to find the hyperconnectors because they have so many points because they're really effective at spreading that application. And then target them. Say, hey, you know what, will you look at my application and tell all your friends about it?
Shelley, people are asking, I told them that we record this and we provide it afterwards as a QuickTime movie, but there's a lot of interest in people want your PowerPoint presentation. Are you willing to make it available, or do you feel uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, no, I can make that available. If you email me, then I will send you a copy.
Okay. Or you can email me at Webcast at O'Reilly, and I have a copy that I can send you as well. So just send an email, and Shelley's email is up there. And let's see, are there other questions? I know someone was speculating that if your app does something valuable for the user, won't it become popular?
Well, actually, I don't necessarily think that is so because you're competing against a lot of other applications, and again, you will have that slow and steady growth, but because you're competing against other applications that are more effectively using the viral features. They're going to get that sort of early or first use, first bid on that user's attention. So I actually think that there are a number of really high-quality applications within the Facebook application ecosystem that are not considered successful for that reason, because they are growing so slowly and they're not competing well against other applications in getting that user's attention. One of the few examples of that slow and steady but successful growth is actually Scrabulous. It had a very, I actually looked at a lot of growth patterns of these successful applications, and it had compared to all other applications, it was extremely linear. It just incremented a little bit each week, but, in substantial enough form that by its 13th week within the system, it was in the top 200. But that's really rare.
Okay. Do you see the questions coming in, or would you prefer that I read them to you?
Well, I think
because we've had a few come in pretty quickly.
Text chat window. Oh, I see.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, we had quite a few come in. Going back to the one right before how to. You don't need to go back that far. I think you can scroll up from the bottom just a little bit.
Okay. How do application developers normally monetize their applications?
Yeah.
Why don't I address that one? That's actually a really common question. I reviewed about 350 applications in total, and the dominant revenue model is advertising. So pixel share. So within your own application, when you advertise within your application, any click-through that you get off of that, you can retain entirely, whereas Facebook retains any click-throughs that happen in advertising that are around your application. But generally, in order to be, like, the click-through rates in social networking spaces is not very high, which means in order to generate enough money to be self-sufficient as an application, you really do need to be in that top 50 type of application. I saw one or two cases of other kinds of revenue models. For example, the gifts. Some people were charging $1 per gift, but that was really rare. Let's see, what else do we have here? Does revenue model impact popularity? I assume so. I would imagine that you're going to have much lower viral spread the more money you're charging for your system. I do think, I'm hoping that the ecosystem changes over time to become, as Facebook itself sort of respond to what's been happening with this sort of early set of applications, which is that they do tend to be pretty lightweight, and in part because of some of the data portability and privacy issues. As they sort of evolve their policies, and as the population in Facebook becomes more mature over time, I do hope that we'll see more heavyweight and more professional applications within the system. What else? Do you think there's room for consider to use of applications? For example, another way to pay bills or college fees for user, or even peer-to-peer money transfer. There definitely needs to be a shift in what people think Facebook is for before that can happen. Right now, people are not expecting that they're going to go into Facebook and engage in monetary transactions. I do think that shift can occur, but I wouldn't bet on it either. Shopping applications, I would say, are actually they feel like shared shopping or engage in the process of shopping. It feels very personal. It's something you can do with your friends. So actually, I do think that shopping applications have a pretty good chance of doing well within Facebook. Once that's figured out. Let's see. Social networking apps does not matter as long as the app is truly useful. So I'm addressing Vincent here. You mean the social networking aspect does not matter as long as the app is truly useful? Actually, I'm saying I think the opposite, that people are going to Facebook to engage in the behavior of networking, and so there are a lot of applications actually that are very useful. Like I saw some file sharing applications, or they're very utilitarian, RSS aggregators within the context of your profile. But because they're so utilitarian, without that social component, the component of interacting and sharing or developing your friendships, they were not well used. There are quite a lot here.
I know. Well,
how
the next
effective?
one, how effective can building a Facebook application be in driving users to your own site or social network?
There have been some examples. They're not coming to the top of my head right now, but there have been some really successful examples of that actually, where people created an application that was some subset of their primary application, and it was actually generate a lot of, at the very least, a lot of awareness and promotion, but then also a lot of click-throughs to their full-on application. So if you think of Facebook as a place to promote as opposed to a place to generate money on its own, it's actually really effective. Just getting the word, getting people aware of your name brand.
Do you want to take a few other questions?
Do you think the communication, I'll take the last couple here. Do you think the communication enhancement sorts of apps will migrate well to professional networks? Actually, I don't think, some of them will not, because you don't really need to engage in paraverbal communication, for example, such as kissing and hugging with people in a professional context. LinkedIn, in fact, they're so worried about maintaining their professional tone that when they first started, they didn't even have pictures because they really wanted to keep their interactions at a certain level. And there are a lot of the enhanced communication tools are very much the kind of interactions you have with friends, not on a professional level. I'm not familiar with how well Lemon is doing. In the last one, in regards to apps for donating, charity, and doing good in the community, what kinds of trends have you seen? There was one. There's one really popular application called Causes, which is quite simply, it's sort of like profile enhancement, but plus a little social good, which is you put your favorite causes on, and it appears in your profile. But you also are donating to the causes that you really care about. And so they've actually been extremely popular and been able to generate a fair amount of money to these causes. through the application. So it's very exciting to see. Can you further define what you mean by shared shopping? Shared shopping, for a lot of people, shopping is a social activity. So that means you're going out and you're buying things together. And there have been a number of online tools that really try to do that as well, where you go shopping with your friends, even though you're on different machines. Is your research here done? I think this is a good question to end on, actually. Is your research here done, or are you going to look at the life of an app over the very long term? It depends on my timing and also the availability of what other kinds of data I can get from people. But I do actually think that within Facebook itself, and also as other systems open APIs, such as LinkedIn, I would very much like to take another look at, given enough time, after this first flurry of very viral applications, will we see some of those more useful or utilitarian, but growing slow and steady type applications?
Great. Thank you so much, Shelley. This has been a fascinating presentation. I really appreciate you answering all these questions, too. And
you're welcome.
And for everyone who joined us today, we will make the movie available probably sometime next week, and I'll send you all an email at that time, and you can also find it on our site. So thank you once again, and it was a great presentation, and we'll invite you to come join us next time.
Yeah, and feel free to email me. My email is up there on the screen if you want to drop me a question.